Sveiki! Šios vasaros įvykiai gali iš esmės paveikti mūsų regiono saugumą. Ukraina pradėjo ilgai lauktą kontrpuolimą, o Vilnius rengėsi NATO viršūnių susitikimui, kuris vyks jau greičiau negu po mėnesių. Ką Lietuvai ir Ukrainai žada Vokietija? Apie tai šiandien studijoje kalbėsiuosi su kadenciją baigiančiu Vokietijos ambasadoriumi Lietuvoje Mattiasu Sonnu. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming to our studio.
Thank you for your invitation. It's a pleasure.
Will Germany deploy a brigade in Lithuania?
Absolutely. It already is starting to deploy a brigade for Lithuania, and the degree to which soldiers will be here physically depends mainly on three factors. The first factor is NATO planning, which is often forgotten in this discussion. And I think that is forming up very concretely now. The second factor is Lithuania's very impressive efforts at building up infrastructure. The third factor is Germany's own increasing military capability. But the process that we are working on together, Lithuania and Germany, is clearly going to lead to gradually increasing numbers of German boots on the ground in Lithuania and German equipment on the ground in Lithuania.
Some officials said that they would like to see a clear time frame from Germany and that they have failed to receive that. Is that true?
I would not necessarily assume that such calls for a time frame are always made in good faith, because nobody could reliably, solidly predict the time frame now. You know, you're at the beginning of a process which is gradual, systematic, step by step. We are clearly, the German military and the Lithuanian military are clearly a very good fit. They both like working with each other. And to say, yes, on the 15th of March 2026, we will have X number of soldiers here, you could say that. Would it be serious and solid? No, it would not.
So to follow up maybe on that, the harshest criticism towards German authorities came from our foreign minister, Mr. Gabrieliaus Landsbergio, and some other officials. Mr. Landsbergio said in an interview, and I quote, that Germany might be even regretting its promise of a brigade. Would you respond to such statement?
I would not respond directly to any specific Lithuanian politicians' interviews. You know, if I need to have a dialogue with Lithuanian politicians, I go to them and talk with them directly. I won't do this through the media. But there is something I can say about this. Lithuania and Germany are doing the right thing, strengthening NATO's eastern flank. We're doing this together. We are each other's best mutual fit in this project, existential as it is for both. We are going about it the right way, systematically, step by step. We are planning in line with our allies, in particular the two other framework nations in this region. That is actually not mentioned often enough in the Lithuanian debate, that this is not an isolated German-Lithuanian phenomenon, but this is something that has to cover the whole Baltic region. And this is why all this needs to be embedded in NATO, close bracket. The brigade is being stood up in line with NATO's adapted military planning for the eastern flank, with Lithuania's impressive efforts on infrastructure and with Germany's own growing military capabilities. So the answer to your question is, I don't think you or anyone else could name any rational cause for regret on either side, as hard as you might try. Quite the contrary. Near the end of my mandate here, I feel proud to have been a small part in a great endeavor.
Let's move to a wider context of situation, first of all, in Ukraine. And also let's talk about Germany. Critics argue, and even some German politicians argue, that Germany bears part of the responsibility for Russia's aggression in Ukraine due to its support to Nord Stream and economic ties that filled the Russian coffers even after the annexation of Crimea, after the situation in Donbass. Does Germany acknowledge any of its mistakes and its responsibility?
Short answer, yes. Slightly more detailed answer. For a war of aggression, the sole responsibility always lies with the aggressor. However, your question is still not without its fair justification. The question, I would frame it slightly differently. Has the collective West failed to signal clearly enough to Russia, to Russia's dictator, where effectively the limits of his freedom of action lay? Or even more concretely, was it foreseeable that Putin would start a war that destroyed the decades-old European peace order, which the Soviet Union and then Russia itself had helped create, and is going to be absolutely ruinous for his own country? Was that foreseeable? Some claim today, mostly those who ask your question, claim today that they always knew it. I tend to believe very few of them. Nonetheless, this can be debated. This is not an illegitimate question. And if you debate it, then to your question of Germany's share in the responsibility, I think the bigger partners, the bigger countries, always have to carry a bigger part of the responsibility than the smaller partners, particularly when, as in this case, the bigger partners have in fact failed to listen to the smaller partners more carefully. And that is freely acknowledged by German politicians from all sides, the former government as well as the current government. However, be careful of hindsight. The wisdom of hindsight is misleading. All these warnings were made correct, not from day one. It was not like a predetermined path that then realized itself. All these warnings became right the moment one man, the Russian dictator, decided to start a war. And that was not a predetermined outcome from the beginning.
So let's move then to what's happening during the war and the response after Putin sent his troops to Ukraine. A few days after that, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced Zeitenwende, a historic turn in defense policy, first of all, of Germany. Some also are disappointed about the pace, how it's happening. So what is really happening? Is there now consensus to increase the defense budget, to have a more robust defense policy, and also in that context, the German troop deployment in Lithuania, what role it plays in this wider picture of German Zeitenwende?
That is a big question. I'll try to offer the answer in small portions. Perhaps the quickest implementation of the Zeitenwende did not happen directly in the military area, because that takes more time. It happened in the area of energy policy. You mentioned Nord Stream before, and Germany managed within 5 months after the declaration of the Zeitenwende to draw down its Russian energy imports from 55% of our fossil energy imports to exactly 0. By August last year, we were at 0, and that is where we're staying. That, I think, is not the typical example of, you often hear the image of the German supertanker taking a long time to change course. I was, perhaps I can even admit that, myself a little surprised at how fast we managed to move on that one. Is it serious on the military side? Yes, very. And you will see that. It is going on, and the results will become visible. The money will be available, the funding will be available. The public conscience of the importance of military strength is growing. You asked initially, is there consensus? In a big democracy, there's never full consensus. You have the main opposition parties on board, you have all the government parties on board, and you have a marginal rest of perhaps 15% that are not necessarily against, but that are sitting on the fence and not fully behind it. This is the situation in the German democracy. This is going to happen.
About the German public perception that you briefly mentioned, on a personal note, since 2017, when Germany took responsibility to lead a battalion, from Germans, be it officials or journalists, my colleague journalists, I always got surprised sometimes by the questions whether you Lithuanians are unhappy or afraid or have a bad sentiment of having German troops here in Lithuania. And we were surprised by the question sometimes. They were surprised by the answer that, German troops are most welcome because we need as much allies as we can to defend against Russia, which did not happen in 1940s when we were left alone. It's partly because of still difference in historic perception of what has been happening there. How is German public perception changing about the idea, and how important is this idea of sending troops and military equipment eastwards? How much role history still plays in that?
Well, history plays a huge role in Germans' general reluctance or general lack of enthusiasm for military things in general. That is changing. It is, however, this is one of the subliminal deep changes which take time. After World War II, the German military was deeply tainted by what the German armed forces under the Nazi German time had participated in here in Eastern Europe, i.e. that they were in a way part of a criminal regime and a genocidal war of aggression by Nazi Germany. And it took decades and decades to build up a democratic reputation for our military again, a legitimacy as part of our new German democracy. The result is, and you described it very well from your discussions with German colleagues, you will not have this simple, if you want, nationalistic or patriotic or jingoistic enthusiasm for military stuff. For us, in Germany, military capabilities, military strength, will always be a bitter necessity and not something that we enthuse about. And that's where these questions come from. Why are German soldiers so much more popular in Lithuania than they used to be in our own country? This simply comes from differing historical experience. And these deep-set experiences we have to take into account in dealing with each other and in having understanding for one another. But it should not be doubted that already in 2017, when Germany took the lead of the EFP battle group here, with a whole German battalion and then, other contingents around it, already then, coming here was a very well reflected decision. Simply reflecting the fact that this is alliance defense and therefore defense of ourselves. The recognition that Lithuania's security is our security in our alliance. And if your question is, did most Germans understand this at the time in 2017? The answer is clearly no. If your question is, was the political decision to do this based on this recognition? The answer is unambiguously yes. That's why we're here.
And to sum up the questions about the German military presence here in Lithuania, does Germany have, or when it will have, if not today, both the political will and military capabilities to fight a conventional war with Russia if Russia attacks Baltic states?
Honestly, this question goes a little beyond my competency as a civilian, although I have served in the German army. I believe that we are already, together with the Lithuanian armed forces and NATO's overall dispositive. Let's not forget that the Americans are also here with armed forces. We are already able now to defend. This, I think, NATO recognizes will need further improvement, but I believe any aggressor would already now understand that the risk in even trying would be unbearably high.
Let's move to NATO summit in Vilnius, which may or may not be one of the more consequential summits in NATO in recent decades. Would Germany support opening the doors for Ukraine to join NATO in Vilnius?
I believe what Germany is most of all seeking on this issue is consensus among NATO partners. We need to be all fully on board on this. We are committed to Ukraine's security. I think the second element of consensus that I can see, without being a NATO expert, the second element of consensus is that we will not have new members in our alliance which are at war at the time when they join. But the door being open to every country that fulfills the requirements, that has already been decided long ago. It's NATO's open door policy. And so your question, if you take it strictly, logically, will Germany be in favor of opening the door to Ukraine? The answer is no, because the door is already open.
You mentioned this precondition of ending a war, which is probably number one reason that we often hear. But critics also have a good argument that it's just encouragement for Russia, for Putin, to continue a war, or after pause to start a new war. And just a few hours before we met here, former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen gave a speech at Vilnius University where he urged to extend the invitation to Ukraine to join NATO already here in Vilnius, saying that, and I quote him, there will always be instability and the threat of Russian attack as long as Ukraine is outside. Do you agree or do you disagree with him?
Forgive me, I have not seen the speech. I wouldn't disbelieve what you paraphrased, but I wouldn't directly comment on what a former NATO Secretary General is saying. What I can say is that Mr. Rasmussen is a highly respected voice in NATO circles and in European political circles. I would not want to predict the outcome of our upcoming NATO summit in precise terms. Honestly, I'm not part of the negotiation. I am the bilateral ambassador to Lithuania, and it would be presumptuous of me to say anything about a process that I am not directly involved in. Honestly, if I was involved in it directly, I would probably also not tell you what's going on.
Okay, something that you, I believe, would answer, and that's more about personally you and your presence here in Lithuania. To conclude our interview, Mr. Ambassador, what feelings are you bringing back to Berlin after 4 years in Lithuania?
You're asking an ambassador about feelings. Okay. A sense of very deep gratitude is the prevailing sentiment that I have at the end of my mandate here. It's always a privilege to serve as your country's ambassador, but infinitely more so when you are allowed to serve in a country with such intimate, long-standing historical links with Germany, and with currently the closest military strategic linkage possible or imaginable. I said already this is existential for both Germany and Lithuania, because your security is our security, and that's why we're here. And if you ask our soldiers, maybe that would illustrate it well. Our soldiers who are deployed here, they understand this. And they understand that's why they're here. That makes it unique, because you know that for Germany, Lithuania is unique in many ways. But one of the ways in which Lithuania is unique for us is that this is the only place where Germany has troops deployed on alliance defense. We have that nowhere else in the world. And this was not by coincidence. This was by mutual choice between our two countries. And so it is, I was very keen. I wanted Vilnius as a posting. And all diplomats can tell you, normally you never get the posting you really want. And in this case, I got exactly what I wanted. And then, looking back 4 years, it became very different from what I had expected. First, the pandemic. Then, the issue very much relevant to Germany's economy of China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and honestly, Lithuania's leadership role within the EU on standing up for European values in this issue. I think Lithuanian foreign policy can be quite proud of that. Belarus in August 2020, where Ms. Tikhanovskaya was welcome here on day one after the stolen election. And most of the rest of Europe took a year or two to get to the point where Lithuania was on day one. And finally, Putin's war of aggression, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. All these were things that I could never have expected, and I cannot say that my time here was lacking in interest or in fascination or in excitement or just simply in professional activity. Hence this feeling of profound gratitude.
One more thing that you revealed just before the interview, and let me reveal that to audience, you said you never expected also such good kepta duona.
That's true. And it has become extremely popular with my family back home in Britain and in Germany as well. If I had a secret ambition, it would probably be to popularize it in German beer gardens. But don't give this business idea away to anybody else. Can I say one other thing about Lithuania?
Please do.
It's a very European issue. Where does Lithuania belong? Where does it stand within Europe, within the EU? I think Lithuania is a unique case as far as I can tell. Lithuania is core Europe despite its geographical location in Europe. Why is this? Because it's using its EU membership wisely and with considerable resolve and with strategic aims. Not for narrow national concerns like some other smaller member states, but in Europe's strategic interest. And this gives Lithuania a European leadership potential far beyond its size. And my hope at the end of my time here, that also means, my hope is that Lithuania will continue to make good use of this leadership potential. And I'm pretty sure as long as you decide to remain core Europe and not go with those who misunderstand Europe as an instrument to further your narrow national interests, as long as Lithuania sticks with that, the future is great.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. Good luck in Berlin in spreading the heritage of kepta duona and everything else. All the best to you. And ačiū, mėly žiūrovai, iki pasimatymų per kitus interviu.
Thank you very much.